Hi there. We're going to take a look at Rickie Fowler's golf swing today. He's certainly a good young player. He was ranked 22nd last year on the official PGA money list. Pretty good for a rookie. Made the Ryder Cup team. Made 2,000,008 last year. That's pretty darn good, isn't it? What we have here is we have Rickie side by side, so we can see what he's doing at the same time from different views. We have him moving, swinging as compared to the model. And the model is 1964 Hogan. That's the footage that was taken at the tip after Shell's Wonderful World of Golf with the Hogan Snead match. And he had 18 greens. Pretty good round of golf. Now what we're going to do is take a look at some traces. I used to use video all day, every day, and what I found was that good players and poor players and all players, they would get so enamored with a particular spot that we were interested in finding and moving to and through that they would kind of get stuck at spots. So I had the chance to find out that traces were a very powerful tool. A trace is a body segment that goes from one end to the other. I think that the pivot's an extraordinarily powerful part of the golf swing. I think that hands hold the club and pivot does the work. Hands control the pivot in the sense that if they make bad moves, it ruins the pivot. If they can serve and are left alone, they allow the pivot to work. So in that sense, hands control the pivot. But the pivot certainly does the work. The hands don't do the work. Now what we see here is this is a left shoulder trace. And it's a very similar look. The interesting difference is that Rickie goes down on the lower line, Hogan comes down on the higher line, and Rickie comes through on the higher line, and Hogan goes down on the lower line. Hogan went down. Our information showed that Hogan was probably 5 inches shorter. He was probably less than 5 foot tall at impact, considering he was 5'8" when he started and probably 5 foot at address. So you can see how much, how far through it goes. That's a good player's trademark. You can see that the left shoulder really gets through, and Rickie comes back again in front. That's why his head goes forward. He stands right on top of his left foot, and it's very balanced there. That's a great place to be. Just right on top of his shoulder, right on top of his left hip. Now the right shoulder difference here is that Rickie, you can see that Rickie makes a little sharper turn. He doesn't slide quite as much. That's why we have no space in the backstroke line and the downstroke line for his right shoulder. And Mr. Hogan, on the other hand, has a substantial gap, and the gap is kind of indicative of the hip slide. But here again, I think the thing that really shows up is how remarkably far after impact the right shoulder goes. I always like to think that at impact the men begin and the poor players cease. Now, an interesting thing here is when we see Hogan's elbow, his elbow is actually slightly lower than he started, which makes sense because he got shorter, didn't he? He has to get shorter if his hands are further ahead. And Rickie's elbow is considerably higher. Now, the reason that happens, if we take a look here, is we see that Rickie's getting shorter. The movie is misleading too. It's the whole ground's coming up. But if you just look at his feet away from the ground, you can see his heels 2.5 inches off the ground. And Hogan's into the ground. Now this, when people have the kind of arm speed that these young players have today, that tends to drive them off the ground, whereas the pivot players of the past that were a little bit less arm oriented were able to stay in the ground more. They were more grounded. But speed is speed, whether you're in the ground or not. And these guys just hit it so far, don't they? Now, again, I think that the most important thing to see here is how dramatically far the left elbow goes. And I cut Hogan off here at the end a little bit, but you can see how far Rickie goes. And actually this line, you can see how it's come back down. There's a force vector on his elbow and club that are going into the ground at the top, which is indicative of how far through he's going. But now let's take a look at Rickie's trademark move. And what you see is how nicely he leaves that club alone in that move right there. From both views, you can see when he makes that move, the club head, if anything, it just seeks to go back. It's just seeking to go down. His elbow's going straight down. The club's going straight down. And now this is a pretty hard thing to get the average player to do, because the average player thinks it's pretty important to get the club back to the ball, and the great player has the courage to realize the guy who gets to the ball latest is probably without question the greatest. I'm convinced that if your wrists are soft and your arms are hanging and your head is back, you can't be too far ahead of it. Now remember I said that your shoulders are soft, your wrists are soft, and your head is back. If your head moves ahead, you could get too far ahead of it. If your hands and arms are tight, you can get too far ahead of it. But now here's a guy who has the courage to completely leave it alone. And then we make the next move, and then we see his other dramatic and wonderful gift is, and maybe it's not a gift, maybe it's how hard he works, but this man is his club is flying toward the ball, and he couldn't miss it if he tried. If he leaves it alone, he can't miss it. So that's certainly a wonderful thing. Let's take a look over here at the model as an overlay, and we can see how very close, really, Rickie is. He's in many ways he's a modern day Hogan, and I think he'll evolve into a tighter pattern. But gosh, he's so dramatically effective now. It's going to be exciting to watch how good he gets. Well, I hope this was of interest to you. I enjoyed doing this, and I'll talk to you again. Thanks.